Lovely to see so many of you here, and what dedication on such a lovely sunny evening as well. My name's Fiona Shaw. I'm part of the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team at Education Scotland. I've got a secondary background in chemistry and physics, and I'll let Gemma Rose introduce herself as well.
Hello, I'm Gemma Rose Lansdowne, and I'm another one of the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities officers. I cover the Southeast regions, and I have a primary and early years background.
So what you can see on the screen here is our contact details and our Twitter account. Some of you might already follow us, but if you don't, give us a follow, and our web address, but we'll share those links afterwards. So if you do have questions after the session, please do get in touch. There's one of us for every region, so we can certainly put you in touch with the relevant officer. So quick outline of the session this afternoon. We said this in the blurb when you signed up as well, but we wanted to spend a bit of time outlining the impact of gender stereotypes and unconscious bias on three areas, so well-being, participation and attainment, and then having a look at how these, how you can sort of address the effects of these through experiences, interactions and spaces. And as you will probably recognise, that wording terminology comes from and links to realising the ambition being me. So at the end of the session, we, just as a little plenary, we normally ask what's made you think. So head, something that's maybe interested you. Heart, what resonates with you or maybe has struck a chord with you. Bag, what are you going to take away with you and start to implement. And bin, what should we bin? What didn't you find useful that we could maybe improve on? And if we've got time, we'll get you to share those thoughts on a Jamboard. So just a little reminder of maybe starting to think about some of these things as we go through. And I wanted to start with an activity, and what I'm going to do just now is share a link with you in the chat pane. I'm going to ask you to click on that link. It will ask you to type in 3 words that you associate with boys and 3 words that you associate with girls, and really try and put the first things that come into your head for this. And it doesn't matter if it's really stereotyped. It really is just to write the first things that pop into your head. So it should be showing on the boys one just now, and when I've had enough people type into that, I'll move it on to the girls one. If you enter each one separately, then it just means it comes up as a word cloud. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and start sharing the word cloud so you can see some of those coming through. And I'll just give it a couple of minutes. So if you've used word clouds before, the bigger the word, the more often it's said. So we've got blue, football and loud coming through as bigger words here. And I'm just going to pop it onto the girls one now. So if I can get you to do that, and then you can see those words coming through as well. And what I'm going to get you to do is just to, I'll put it back when everyone's had a chance to input the words, but sort of reflect on the patterns that come through and any messages you think that this might be giving to young people. Okay, so we've got big words being pink, creative, dancing. I think the others are all kind of similar actually. but certainly very different to the boys' ones, and hopefully you can observe that as well. So I'm just going to pop it back onto the boys' one so that we can compare quickly. So that's the one for the boys. And certainly there's a lot more focus on sort of physicality and obviously the colour blue. We've got a couple of similar words in here to the girls' one, which is great to see. Caring as well. Rough, physical, active. Compare it to the girls' one, you've got that kind of careful, emotional, quite nurturing words, I suppose, and then words that might be more associated with appearances. So we 100% weren't doing this to catch you out. It's just a really nice exercise to do to kick off, because what it does is it helps to highlight some of the stereotypes that are prevalent, both that we're aware of and those that exist in society. And of course, this isn't necessarily stereotypes that we would agree with, nor that we would subscribe to, but it's kind of interesting just to see them and sort of start to recognise the effect that they might have on us and also on children. So I'm just gonna, that's it. Thanks, Gemrose. And you know, by the time children enter ELC settings, they might already be developing gender-based expectations of behaviours and preferences and different abilities. And then these stereotypical views can kind of shape their attitudes to all sorts of things. So relationships, participation in the world of work, and it can also affect their well-being. So a narrowing of experiences at a young age can often evolve into a narrowing of opportunities later on in life. For example, in secondary school, boys tend to lag behind girls in literacy and language, and girls are still underrepresented in physics, technology and engineering. And, the problem is multifaceted, but in ELC and early primary, I think there's a really important role to play in challenging those views before they become so ingrained. And obviously, we're not saying children should be coerced into an activity, but also adopting the attitude that children are able to choose what they want will not necessarily counteract that. And you might have seen it yourself. Many children self-select out of certain activities based on their observations for what's appropriate for them. So what does this have to do with STEM? Well, obviously it is wider than STEM because it's about addressing stereotyping and bias to try and remove any limiting barriers for children. But the hope is that this will then have a positive effect on the diversity of all areas, but also significantly for STEM. So in terms of well-being, this is all kind of research-informed data, and we've just picked a couple of aspects out here to discuss. And I think Gemrose is sharing a link here to the nurturing whole school approach. But essentially, a study looking at nurture data, primary age boys were 3 times more likely to experience high social, emotional, behavioural and or mental health needs compared to girls. And interestingly, it was found that children whose friendship groups emphasise traditional stereotypes tend to have lower overall well-being. This can also be affected by differences in how behaviour is sanctioned or rewarded, and that is influenced by gendered expectations. So where learners thought they were shouted at, for example, only boys thought that only for boys it led them to hate school, whereas the girls tended to make excuses for teachers or blame themselves to some degree for being shouted at. And something which I always found really surprising is that in these, maybe a couple of years out of date, but in 2018-19, boys accounted for 79% of total exclusions in Scotland. So there's certainly an impact on, a significant gendered impact on well-being that we can see. I mentioned this before, but in terms of participation, my screen's just something funny, and we can see from the word clouds that stereotypes can influence the activities that children associate with and engage with, and then that will shape their emerging interests and skills and ultimately the roles they take in society as adults. So that pervasiveness of gendered messages is likely to result in children selecting stereotypical aspects of provision, irrespective of their experiences outside nursery. So that was a really interesting piece of research that sort of reached that conclusion. And then engagement with specific out-of-class opportunities is also gendered, particularly stark in ASN settings as well. And then in terms of attainment, there are, and again you'll be familiar with this, there are gender gaps in reaching developmental milestones and in attainment. And this can be acknowledged from birth, and it can be seen in forms from health visitors as well, so that they're acknowledging that. And underperformance can negatively impact boys or girls, but it tends to be in different areas. In schools where, this is a bit maybe primary school age, where gender constructions are less accentuated, boys actually tend to attain better. And there's something interesting here around confidence, is that this came from the PISA study, that more girls than boys agreed with the statement, "When I'm failing, it makes me doubt my plans for the future." So that shows quite a confidence gap between boys and girls. And boys do tend to report higher levels of confidence than older girls as well. So I wanted to sort of connect that to the influence of practitioners, and this is from a Fawcett report, Unlimited Potential, and we can share the link to the report. But essentially, early years practitioners were asked whether they'd seen or heard any of the following. It is quite small, but basically the first one is, people say boys will be boys when boys misbehave. So as you can see, the orange is often, and the blue is often and the orange is sometimes, and they make up quite a significant proportion of that particular bar. Different pet names used for girls, again, quite a significant part of that. People had seen that happen often or sometimes. Girls and boys are split into different groups for activities. Doesn't happen as much, but still significant. People assume boys and girls want to do different activities. That's actually probably the highest of them all. And then staff enabling play, which is typical for children's gender. And again, you can see that makes up a significant proportion there. So interestingly as well, within this research, those practitioners with shorter period of service tended to hear both boys will be boys more than those who'd been in practice for longer. And also gender pet names are more commonly heard by practitioners with higher qualifications and practitioners in majority Black and minority ethnic settings and religious settings. So that's another kind of interesting element to this as well. So given this, it's unsurprising that what we see here, 62% say that they've seen staff enable gender stereotypical play, such as boys dressing up as firemen and girls as princesses, often or sometimes. And again, that behaviour was more commonly observed in religious and more diverse settings. So some interesting findings from that research. There's lots more to it than just this, but I just thought I'd pick this out to sort of show the things that you might have seen or heard, and the things that can certainly have an impact on children and their understanding of gender and stereotypes. And then again, from the same report, I just wanted to share this quote with you. I'm just going to let you read it through. And again, I think if we think to the word clouds that we created, which again, we wouldn't necessarily subscribe to, but do have an effect, you could see some of those characteristics coming out here as well. So it's how those stereotypes get reinforced, I suppose. Compliance is seen as a positive attribute for girls, but not necessarily for boys. And they are given a bit more leeway, despite then ending up being excluded, more likely to be excluded. So it's quite interesting as well. So that was kind of just a quick overview, really, of the links to well-being, participation and attainment, and then kind of bringing that back to how practitioners can have an influence on that. I'm going to hand over to Gemma Rose now to talk a little bit more about how we might address that through, first of all, experiences.
Thank you. Hello. So we're going to just spend a little bit of time looking at experiences, and we know how important it is for children to be given time to play throughout the day to follow their own line of inquiry or individual interest. Play can be and mean many different things to children and adults. We may describe activities we plan as play, whereas a child may not see these as play at all. Play is therefore both a tricky word and concept to describe. It can be fun and joyful or difficult and complicated. Through play, the child can learn to answer their own questions, learn new skills, and learn to work collaboratively with other children or adults. So it offers a great vehicle to challenge gender stereotypes. I'm going to pick up a little bit more on the Lego Foundation. They have, I'm just going to try and click through. There we go. So they have identify 5 characteristics of play. It is worth noting that not every one of these 5 characteristics needs to be included in equal measure in every play activity that we plan. So looking at meaningful, when the child can relate new experiences to something already known, so bringing in that prior knowledge as well. In play, children often explore what they have seen and done or noticed others do as a way of grasping what it means. Children pretend play is rich in information about how they understand gender relations. As they play having babies, being monsters, or making a hospital, they show others what they think girls and women can and should do and what boys and men can and should do. So they might be acting out or reinforcing gender stereotypes they see in the world around them. For example, mums doing the caring and dads going out to work. Part of this could involve looking at the myths and expectations that are attached to these stereotypes and exploring this just to bust some of those myths. And then we look at joy is at the heart of play. It's being curious, trying things out, that moment of insight or success after overcoming challenges. And when children are in that moment and vibing off that positive mindset, that's when they may be more open to trying new things, give challenging things a go, maybe make a mistake and have the resilience to try again, and really giving themselves the best chance at learning. This is significant for girls, as research shows girls are more risk averse, so creating these joyful experiences can mean they gain the confidence in areas they might not otherwise explore. And then looking at social interaction, there's been research done that looks at how, because of the subtle yet constant reinforcement of gender stereotyping throughout a child's life, boys have a much more difficult time communicating a broad range of emotions. If you have watched ever the BBC documentary No More Boys and Girls, it's hours long and available on YouTube, and we're going to watch a small clip of it later. They talk a bit about this in terms of the children in the class. The only emotion which the majority of boys within the class were overwhelmingly able to identify and display was anger. So any activities which encourage children to learn how to be with each other socially, talk, identify and regulate different emotions is a fantastic way of mitigating the effect of gender stereotyping. It's also, given the impact of the past 12 months, it's definitely something that all our children need. Learning through play also involves being actively engaged. Think about those times when a child is so fully absorbed in play that they fail to notice the time or someone calling them. This is the potential to mitigate the impact of gender stereotyping, because highly effective questioning could lead to questioning expectations and concepts connected to stereotyping and really busting those myths. One of the play activities in No More Boys and Girls was about combating the myth that boys are stronger than girls. The setup of the activity involved the pupils first answering questions about who they thought would be the strongest and which gender might be stronger, and then moved on to allow them to try out some practical tasks that tested strength. Having had the experience, they were then questioned again about what they had observed, and overwhelmingly they realised that there had been very little difference in the strengths of all the pupils in the class. That's an excellent example of a play activity that is actively engaging while still combating gender stereotyping. You may be using the Leuven scale of engagement for tracking and assessment in your setting, and a lot of this picks up on the 5 characteristics from the Lego Foundation. So I don't want you to think that we're giving you brand new information. there's a lot of crossover and a lot of tie-ins that you can use in your everyday practice. And then the final element will be looking at iterative, so trying out possibilities, revising hypotheses and discovering the next question leads to increased learning. Making paper aeroplanes with the P7 class, we started off with basics and then pupils refined and tested their ideas, each trying to make the one that flew the furthest, highest, or could do spins. Again, this connects to the gender impact on resilience, growth, mindset, and the idea of taking risks. Girls are less likely to take risks and less likely to have growth mindsets. It's potentially one of the reasons as to why we see less girls take STEM subjects, because they're more anxious in situations where they have to take risks and try new things. So similar to joyful, any activities which enable pupils to be iterative will be a positive step for mitigating the impact of gender stereotypes. So on the right is an image from the triple helix from the Learning Through Play document. And just to do a direct quote, the triple helix symbolizes 3 strands of activity working in harmony together. All 3 are essential components and the structure is weaker for the absence of one. Mabina, Church and Taylor in 2011 explained that learning environments dominated by one approach are not effective and the teacher must make judgments about when and how to provide opportunities for a mix of each. Considering what your role is essential when considering the potential to mitigating gender stereotyping. We don't want to be letting learners reinforce stereotyping behaviours and gender policing each other during child-led experiences, but we also don't want to constantly be giving them answers without giving them the opportunity to figure things out for themselves. Deciding on the role of the teacher for each play experience will be really tricky, and hopefully the next section will provide you with opportunities to reflect on different paths you might go down in terms of considering how to consciously make decisions around how play is planned, what the role of the teacher is during the play experience, and how we can evaluate and build on the experiences of the learners in order to actively combat gender stereotyping. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a little look at this. It's really just to summarise what I was just saying, and that play is essential to learning for all learners at every level. STEM involves problem-solving skills. Play also develops problem-solving. Therefore, play can help develop STEM skills. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing this and show you a clip from the No More Boys and Girls documentary. Okay, Fiona, can you let me know if it's there and you can see? And can you hear?
Yeah, we can see. I can see and hear it.
Right.
Look at this. Look at this. You like a dolly? Shall we go for the dolly? There's a good girl. You're a good little girl, aren't you, Sophie? Look, what does this say? Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Ooh, look at this, Sophie. Meow, meow. I think she liked that pink dolly the best.
If I were to tell you actually that Sophie is Edward,
Does
that change anything?
I maybe thought, oh, this is a little girl, so I have to give her little girl things.
Hello. 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 Come on.
What's this one? Oh, what's that one do? Is that a robot? What about this? Oh, you like that one? What does this one do? Oliver. Oliver.
You've gone for, you could say, boy toys for this boy.
Possibly in my subconscious, but for me, I was just going for what was around me, but in fact my subconscious was automatically playing a trick on me that I was...
If I tell you that he is actually a girl.
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. I suppose it's because of the stereotype.
And then that changed your behaviour towards the child.
It did.
And your behaviour was quite
it
directive.
Did.
1, 2, 3.
Beep, 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 beep. Do you want to see my robot?
She's picked up the robot, the car, the puzzle game. And I think she's been much more physical in handling the child than the other adults have been with girls.
That really astounded me because I thought that I was somebody that had a really open mind.
Surprise. So I automatically went for the pink fluffy toy because I said it was a girl, so I was sort of stereotyping.
I've always thought I was rather more open-minded than that, and I would think, you know, these are children's toys, whatever the gender.
It will make me think the next time I'm with a child, so my niece or my nephew, to make sure that I am actually being sort of fair and equal with all of them, and just giving each child an opportunity to just be whoever they are. So you may have seen that before. As practitioners, you're going to be much more skilled at facilitating and engaging young people in play rather than directing them towards certain toys. But I really wanted to use this video to highlight the power of unconscious bias and to be aware of the influence it might have in places we might not be aware of. I'm just going to bring the PowerPoint back up. Two things always jump out at me from that, and I've seen that clip numerous times. One of them being, as practitioners, the impact of our interactions onto the young person is enormous and can really affect their current choices, their future choices. They're seeking affirmation and confirmation from us in what they're doing, and that can have a large impact. And then it brings it back for us, especially in early years. Really child-centered learning is around choice, pupil choice, and how much choice is true of the learners or is from a small selection that we have predetermined, which is a difficult one to do because we have the resources that we have and they're not infinite. But I always find it an interesting one to think about. So some reflective questions and things to try. I'm not going to spend too long on these as we will send this out as a PDF following the session with the links. So can and do the children use the experiences they have on offer in different ways to test and explore their theories? Are there opportunities for all learners, regardless of their gender, to develop their physical, cognitive, imaginative and creative skills? What's your role, the manager, facilitator, the player? Are you carefully observing and learning from the child? Are you ready to be vulnerable and working uncertainly? What steps are you going to take in your setting to ensure that gender stereotyping is being actively combated through experiences on offer? And this is just a short sort of almost little quick wins that you could try and see if there's anything that you could delve deeper into or make quite quick small adjustments and changes in your settings. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Fiona, who's going to continue to talk a little bit more around spaces.
Thanks, Gemma-Rose. I'm just seeing some of the chat here. So yeah, the particular types of play having an impact on the brain, definitely. It's always really interesting, and it just demonstrates how plastic the brain is as well, which is always really fascinating. Gina Rippon, she was part of that documentary. She's done so much. She's got a book called, I'm just looking up because it's on my shelf, The Gendered Brain, which is really interesting as well. So As John Morris says, on to looking at spaces now, and I know we've spoken about toys quite a lot, and although you wouldn't necessarily be showing toy adverts, again, this is just to highlight how toys can be gendered. And again, when thinking about materials for your spaces, it can be challenging to find objects that don't have some sort of stereotypical label that's attached to them. So this is from Let Toys Be Toys. Again, if you're not familiar with them, definitely recommend giving the website a visit. They've got all sorts of sort of ideas and I suppose lesson plans, but similar to that on the website. But this was a bit of research they carried out on the lead up to Christmas. It's a couple of years old now, but they word clouded all of the adverts that were targeted at girls and the adverts that were targeted at boys. And it's just fascinating to see the differences. And again, the kind of messages that these toys are giving and they're creating. So they then could become self-fulfilling prophecies in young people. And again, the difference in confident language, I think, is quite clear as well between the two. I suppose linking back to what I said earlier about those differences in confidence we see, it can come from all angles. So I know this is tiny, but I just wanted to put it up here. This is a resource from Gender Friendly Nurseries. They're a Glasgow-based organisation, but they've got their materials on a website I'm just sharing with you now. Oh, we've double shared. And this is on page 23, and this is a kind of audit, I suppose, and it just gives you, again, a start of a 10 as to different places you can look and different things, prompts that you can think about. So thinking about displays, are boys, girls shown equally? Are they shown equally engaging in active or sedentary or caring activities? Pictures of parents, have dads and granddads. Toys, we've spoken about quite a lot. Activity corners, do they encourage both genders to play? And I'm going to share a couple of examples of those in a minute. And then specifics, so looking at your books, your dressing up, arts and crafts, etc. So as I say, that's on page 23, and that can be maybe something that you have a look at afterwards. It's quite a comprehensive resource. And you can adapt for your own exploration around your setting as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Gwen, who's kindly come along to share her journey, or the journey that her setting has been through around this topic. So Gwen, I'll hand over to you.
Hi there, it's lovely to join you all this afternoon on this very, very sunny day up here in Inverness. We actually came across the whole gender unconscious bias during lockdown when I was studying from home. I'm an early years practitioner here, and we have a very small setting with just 15 children aged from 2 to 5. And I think it really captured my imagination because when I was reflecting on what I was seeing with the children, already I could see that bias was there. So, the children would easily go off and play. The girls would all huddle in the girls' home corner. The boys never went in. The boys would play over with the baskets where sort of all the building stuff was. And I think, my colleague and I sat down, we started a training with Education Scotland, and Jen took us through sort of 4 sessions. And we did the audit that we just saw. And what we realised is actually it's nothing to do with the children, but everything to do with us. We were the ones who had the home corner set up with the dollies and the pink clothes. We were the ones who had all the building equipment in the baskets. And it seemed, it's easy to say that the children naturally went off and played with what they wanted. But actually, when we reviewed it, we weren't really giving them a wide choice. The boys would dominate that corner. They would bash their bricks. They would bring out the cars. So we decided to do a complete revamp. We changed the room. We have a setup that we have to take down and put up every day. And we'd got into a habit of having the same thing sort of in the same place. So when the children appeared in the home corner, it became just the home space. We introduced dinosaurs into the home corner. So the first day the children came in, we had done away with all the plastic. We brought in real items, silverware. We'd done away with all the pink baby clothes. We brought in different coloured babies and little boy babies. We set the dinosaurs up in the home space having a tea party, and we just got all the baskets that had all the bricks, and we left the bricks, but we started to mix it up. So we have something called, I think they're called munchkins, or little sticky on things that traditionally the girls play with. So we stuck them in there, and we stuck really random things in there. We put some cotton reels in there, some corks in there, and things that we felt would really attract all the children to start playing in a different way. We then took it a stage further and we bought a whole load of books. I think actually you have them on your website. They are by Karina and Jason Bryan. So my mummy is a scientist and things like that. My mummy is a doctor. My daddy, strangely, the only one they've got is my daddy is a nurse at the moment. So we introduced the books, and we also introduced a little bit more diverse books about the LGBT community. And we printed off a whole load of pictures, photographs off the internet of things like a male nail technician, ladies playing football, families made up of different families, so same-sex families, adopted families, families of different cultures and mixed race. And I think what we began to see was a change in how the children played, first and foremost. The boys haven't suddenly wanted to be in the home corner, but it's much more accessible. The boys are beginning to mix more with the girls, which is lovely because we've got a high ratio of girls. We have 11 girls and only 4 boys, but they're beginning to mix more. And when we saw that happening, we decided to introduce drama. Jen had suggested some games to try. So we started introducing drama a lot more. So, for instance, they've been learning about foxes just now, and we got all the children on the floor being foxes, and we used space, we cleared the space, and we said, right, who's the vixen? And before we would say, who's the mummy fox? Who's the daddy fox? But now we were saying, who's the vixen? Who's the dog fox? Who's the cub? And then we would say to them, once they decided, go to your corners. And it was obviously, it was quite mixed by that point. The boys, interestingly, always chose to be the dog fox, but the girls much more open to being anything. But then we would say to them, you have to pair up with somebody so you can get a cub. And the children were amazing because they're now doing that thing where at 4-year-old, they're aware you have generally a mummy and daddy, but they would say, it's okay, these 2 vixens can have a cub. And it was just lovely to see that beginning to unfold. The boys, I think, are taking a little bit longer to come on board with some of the things. They think they have an understanding that girls can be anything. So they're understanding that the girls can be pilots, the girls can drive trains. But I think they really struggle with the concept of them being something that they would see as traditionally feminine still. So I think when you say to the boys, do you think you could be a dancer? They kind of look at you and think, no, I'd rather be a footballer. And, that is perfectly okay. We don't try to force them into anything. But it's, it's really interesting to see how open-minded the girls have become. And the boys are just beginning that journey, really. The parents are actively involved. They're all on board. We've told them all what we're doing. And we sent home some of the books, including some of the more controversial books. And the feedback has been terrific. They're all on board with us, apart from 2 families who struggle a little bit with same-sex families and transgender issues. And what we were in the process of doing is evaluating that. So all in all, I would say we're going on a really good journey. The space that we use is 1 room, and for us it's about much more than the resources, which are important. We've changed quite a lot of things out. But it's about our perception. So, the dolly needs a pram. Well, actually, no, the dolly can have a box and make it a pram. That way then other people are going to use it. We invite the boys into the tea parties by having the dinosaurs there and some of the babies. The boys had made a car out of a cardboard box that was once a pram and became a car. So what we did the next day when they came in, we had all the baby dolls strapped in the back because they wanted to go somewhere. So hopefully, you know, to try to show the boys that this is not your space, we can all share it. And I think the other thing they've all really engaged with is a mantra. We made up a little mantra for them all. So we have this mantra that says, I am loved, I am strong, I've got this. And then we turn to each other, so whoever's next to you, and we say, I believe in you. And quite a few of the parents have commented and saying it's so lovely because the children are going home and actually doing it with their parents. They say they get up in the morning and say, we have to do the mantra. And what we're seeing again is the children beginning to understand they can do anything. You know, it doesn't matter their ability or their sex or their background, the colour of their skin. You know, they're able to start to realise, you know, I've got this, I can really do this. And I think one of the biggest things we've seen is the attainment level is rising. So we've always struggled with our boys wanting to join in with mark making and arts and crafts. And what we're seeing now is this sort of mindset of when they say, well, we can't do that. I don't want to do that. And we'll say, well, but you've got this. What do we say every morning? And they'll go, oh, okay then. And we're actually beginning to see the attainment level rising in literacy with our boys in particular, which is really exciting. And I think, lastly, the biggest success story, I think, when I was speaking to my colleague about what we wanted to share for encouragement is when we first started this journey and we had changed our resources, we had a little girl who always played with the dolls, and then we introduced some different coloured dolls and a boy doll, and she got quite upset one day and came to me and said, can I get some more dolls out? And I said, well, there's still some dollies over there, what's wrong with those ones? And she said, well, it's just the black skinned baby, I can't play with that. And I said, well, why not? And she says, well, it's not the same as me, look, we've got different coloured skin. Now this was way back in the beginning of the journey. So fast forward to about 6 months down the line. It's been a long journey so far because of lockdown. But she was playing with the coloured dolly the other day, and I said to her, you know, I've noticed you play with that a lot now. Do you like it? And she says, yeah. And I says, well, we never used to play with it. What's changed? And she says, well, all those books we've been reading, she said, it told me it doesn't matter the colour of our skin. We're all the same inside. And I have to say, as a practitioner, it was that moment. I thought, oh, wow, somebody's got something here. And it was very, very exciting. So it's a really fabulous journey to take.
Thanks, Gwen. That was an amazing account. I really enjoyed hearing all of that, and hopefully everyone else did too. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure you would have provided lots of inspiration. I think as well the important thing is it will take time, and it you know, even to have achieved those things in 6 months is amazing. So thank you. Oh, lots of comments coming in as well, Gwen, so thank you very much for that. So I'm just looking at the time, and I'm quite keen to share a couple of other things as well. This is another example of, well, it's actually a couple of pictures here, but again, just how they've been tackling self-selection. So similarly, just thinking about how the areas are laid out, and what we've got on the top left is a shop corner. So again, that idea of having sort of non-gendered corners or areas, and that can sort of develop literacy skills. They're making signs for the products, and numeracy skills with the tills and things. So there's a lot of weaving in going on with that. You can see there's puzzles sort of scattered around, and then the numeracy terminology around the block play was there as well as the sort of shapes and things. And then interestingly, some numeracy and literacy and music in the outdoor play area as well. So again, just wanted to share that, a couple of examples there. I'm going to skip through the next two Gemma Rose, just because we're short on time, if that's okay. So we'll just move on to the reflection. Okay, and again, just a couple of questions on reflective questions that we will send out. Thinking about the environment or practice, does it encourage unnecessary segregation? So when queuing up or during games or any kind of storage space, are the displays diverse? And again, I think Gwen gave us lots of examples of how you could do that. Materials used diverse and non-gender stereotypical. How do different genders interact? How has the environment been co-created? And are all the spaces accessible to everybody as well? So a couple of things there. And then again, a couple of things to try, although again, I think Gwen has given us so many, but that idea of children seeing themselves or others doing non-stereotypical things, and again, thinking about the eye line of those pictures, showing posters show a diverse range. You could try counting number of male and female characters in the books you've got, and comparing what roles they're playing. You could observe children, how they use and interact with outdoor and indoor spaces, and again, just that observation and the power of whether that differs by gender. So the next part is around interactions, and this slide's actually showing some research that was done in our pilot project, and what it shows in the green is number of boys and the blue is number of girls. And if you had a class that was roughly equal as we have here, it was interesting that a lot more interactions tended to come from boys, so answers, and also practitioners also tended to check up more with boys as well. And studies also found that practitioners encourage children when they engage in behaviour that's stereotypically expected. So for example, if girls are helpful and if boys are being physical, and that can be subtle, so that can be overt encouragement, or it can be that kind of unconscious encouragement, like the body language, the tone of voice, etc. So I think thinking about the effect that our unconscious bias might have on interactions we have with different learners can be significant. And a bit of research by Carol Dweck, who of growth mindset fame, revealed girls and boys were getting criticised for different things and praised for different things. So girls tend to get criticised for their work content more and praised for good behaviour and effort, but boys get criticised for behaviour but praised for work content. And then that can mean that over time girls kind of lose confidence. So I suppose thinking about promoting that growth mindset in everybody, and again trying to think about the different feedback that's being given can be significant. And I think, again, Gwen highlighted one of the really subtle changes, the subtle power of language. And what we do a kind of longer activity and longer sessions where we get people to decide whether a phrase is okay or not okay. But for today, we've just put a couple of examples of things that you might hear commonly. And again, because of how socially interactive play is and activities in early years, there's lots of opportunities for a wide range of interactions. And so if there's any sexist language or sort of gender policing, basically means when other children say you can't come in here because you're a boy, or you can't do that because you're a girl. So it's about how we can challenge that, but in a way that's open. So asking open questions like, oh, what made you think that? Or why do you think boys are better at this? Can be quite a good way to explore it and unpick it a bit. So again, just to highlight that language can have a really powerful effect on interactions as well. I'm going to skip to, unfortunately, we wanted to have another speaker here today, but she wasn't able to make it. She was happy for us to share the journey. So this is someone who came on one of our courses, a longer term course, and made some really interesting observations about interactions. So I'm just going to share what she sent me. It won't be as interesting or as animated because it's not her reading it out, but so what I'm going to read it out as if it was her. So it's going to sound a bit weird, but so when I think about whole class or whole group interactions within the nursery, there are learners who immediately come to mind as those who are willing to offer their thoughts and ideas in a group situation and others who aren't. So initially I would assume that these were developmental differences based on the learner's age and developmental stage. However, I made a point of doing discrete surveys whilst other practitioners were talking to groups of learners, and while there wasn't a distinct spike in the number of boys answering questions compared to girls, it did seem that boys were quicker and louder in giving their answers. We do encourage hands up to answer, but again, it varies as to which learners remember to do this and when we support them in learning how to do this. Our chat sessions are usually short and tailored to the attention span of our learners, so we need to make sure that everyone who wishes to be heard is heard. I shared this information with my fellow practitioners and we discussed two main themes: how to ensure everyone was heard and how to encourage those children, particularly our girls, who felt less comfortable to answer, and how to raise their confidence. So often some of our younger learners can clam up if we call on them by name, so we decided on some strategies to ensure that everyone was heard and that we didn't make them feel uncomfortable. We used a tried and tested listening game to help us get the thoughts and ideas of our less confident learners. If you are wearing blue trousers, can you please go and wash your hands for snack time? This promotes good listening and good observation skills, and children love it. We asked ideas on a book we had read, and some of our learners were keen to share their ideas. For those learners who were less confident, instead of calling on them by name and picking them on the spot, we used our favourite game of If You Are Wearing. So if you're wearing, for example, a Peppa Pig t-shirt, would you like to tell us about your favourite bit about the story? And then if they felt comfortable with the game, they then tended to feel comfortable to share their thoughts. And this worked really well for some children. But we still noticed some of our children weren't contributing to discussions, so we used collaborative learning, something we hadn't really used before with our younger learners. We asked them to have a chat with their friends and give us their ideas as a group, which really prompted some lovely contributions from some children who felt confident to give their group's thoughts. And some ideas from assessment as for learning really helped, and it helped in shaping how we interact with learners, thinking about whether we're being clear or not from the outset about what's expected of them. It's really made us think about who feels comfortable about speaking up and how we can empower all of our learners to share their thoughts and ideas. The challenges we found were time constraints and attention span of our learners. Most of our nursery session is free flow play, so we are conscious not to take up this child-led play with group interactions. So hopefully, I know I definitely didn't do that justice, but hopefully again that's given some ideas around interactions and some examples of what people have tried. So really quickly, flying through the last wee bit, thinking about interactions, I think unconscious bias can play a huge part in this as well. Thinking about whether gendered wording is used unnecessarily, thinking about pronouns and particularly in relation to jobs. You know, if it's a firefighter, is it he? If it's a refuse collector, is it he? And that kind of thing. Challenge and unpick offensive and sexist language, so asking those open questions. Do you interact differently through words or actions? Do you step in or step back more? And how different roles in the home or different jobs are spoken about. And again, a couple of things to try. Praise and be supportive when they are subverting stereotypes. Try to use non-gendered language, having conversations, monitoring interactions. So we mentioned the Leuven scale, but we've also got an adaptable form. And then ensure men in the setting are enabled to challenge as well. So they should be expected to take on caring, nurturing, not just the kind of rough and tumble play. So I think, again, in the PDF, we would just encourage you to sort of reflect on examples that you've noticed, and then what have you tried or could try to try and mitigate the impact of this. I think if we had more time, we'd be able to sort of spend a bit of time discussing this. And I think just to sort of round up a couple of key messages we wanted to finish with, making sure that link between stereotypes and STEM is clear. I mean, it's obviously going to benefit all areas, but you know, this is the STEM network, and then also the influence that families can have. So I think Gwen mentioned about involving parents, and that really needs to be done sensitively, I think, and understanding, meeting them where they are. observing how children demonstrate what they know in their gendered play, and then remaining aware of that potentially limiting impact. And Mary's just said we'll share a PDF of the presentation. That's totally fine. We've got a couple of signpost links. Oh, and monitor your own language. Don't know why that one was hiding at the bottom there. And building it into improvement plans. And I think that's one way to really drive it forward, is having that whole ethos. And I love that little bit about the mantra that you have every morning. I think that's a really nice way to build that in. So a couple of further links. We've got quick reads, and we've got an ELC action guide on our webpage, and Let Toys Be Toys have got a really useful guides. If you wanted the longer reads, there's the Fawcett Society stuff and the Gender Friendly Nursery, and also Gender Equal Play, which you might have seen from the Care Inspectorate. And then we've put a couple of other things that might be of interest at the bottom there as well. So realise we've done a lot of talking at you today, but hopefully that was useful. I've just put the link there to our National Improvement Hub page, which has got most of the quick reads and different links to other resources on it. So thank you very much for coming along. As I said, it's been fantastic to see so many of you here, and also amazing to hear from Gwen and the bit that Maureen sent in as well. So thanks again. We're happy to sort of stay on if you've got questions, and please do get in touch.